the disappearance of the Sodder children. On the night before Christmas in 1945 in Fayetteville, West Virginia, George and Jenny Sodder were asleep with 9 of their children when a fire started in the house around 1 euro in the morning. George, Jenny, and 4 of their children managed to escape. The remaining children, 14-year-old Maurice, 12-year-old Martha, 9-year-old Louise, 8-year-old Jenny, and 5-year-old Betty still remained in the house. Between the 5 of them, they shared 2 bedrooms located upstairs. George broke back into the house to save the rest of the children, but the staircase was on fire. When he went outside to retrieve his ladder, it was missing from its normal spot. Plus, both of his coal trucks, which he was going to use to stand on top of, were strangely not starting. Marion, one of the children who escaped the fire, ran to a neighbor's house to phone the fire department, but the operator didn't pick up. When another neighbor called, the operator failed to pick up the phone again. That same neighbor actually drove to town and found the fire chief in person, F.J. Morris, and told him about the fire. However, even though the fire station was located a mere 2.5 miles away from the house, the firefighters didn't reach the Sodder home until 8 a.m., 7 hours after the fire began. When they got there, the house was literally burnt to ash. Authorities sifted through the ash to try and find the remains of the missing 5 children, but nothing was found, and they were presumed dead due to the fire. Morris suggested that the fire was so hot that it literally cremated the children's bodies, including their bones. While that theory sounds reasonable, it's not entirely accurate because even when flesh is burned away, bones are typically left behind. Additionally, there was no smell of burning flesh reported during or after the fire. The cause of the fire was deemed to be bad wiring, and the 5 missing children were issued death certificates. Soon after the fire, George and Jenny began to suspect that their children were not dead, but instead kidnapped, and the fire was deliberately set as a diversion. In fact, George had the wiring checked earlier that fall by the power company, which had deemed the wiring in safe working order. While the fire was in progress, a woman came forward and said she saw all of the 5 missing children peering from a passing car. Another woman who was staying at a Charleston hotel had seen the children's photos in a newspaper and said she had seen 4 of the 5 a week after the fire. The children were accompanied by 2 women and 2 men, all of the Italian extraction, she said in a statement. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner, but the men appeared hostile and wouldn't allow it. From the 1950s until Jenny Sodder's death in the late 1980s, the Sodder family maintained a billboard on State Route 16 with pictures of the 5 vanished children and offering a reward for information. The last known surviving Sodder child, Sylvia, still doesn't believe her siblings perished in the fire. To this day, they have never been found. The lost colony of Roanoke. In 1587, English colonial governor John White led a group of people from Britain to found an English colony, settling on Roanoke Island, one of a chain of barrier islands, which is now known as the Outer Banks near North Carolina. When rations were running low, White left for more supplies. When he returned 3 years later, he found the colony carefully abandoned, with all houses and military constructions dismantled with care. Before he had left the colony, White had instructed his people that if they were taken by force, someone was to carve a cross into a nearby tree. But there was no cross nor sign they had been brutally taken over. The only clue was the word Croatoan, the name of a Native American tribe that allied with the English colonists, which was carved into a post. White took this to mean that the colonists had moved to Croatoan Island. Ongoing investigations have claimed that the colonists had been slaughtered by the Powhatan tribe, but there is no archaeological evidence to support this, and a recent re-examination indicates that any massacre that occurred was not of this particular group of colonists, but rather a group of colonists who had arrived earlier. More theories involve an amalgamation between the colonists and the Croatians, but so far, no DNA evidence has identified any descendants of the colony. The case of OJ Simpson. On June 13, 1994, the bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson, the ex-wife of football superstar OJ Simpson, and Ronald L. Goldman were found outside Nicole's townhouse, stabbed to death. At the time, Nicole and OJ were divorced and living in separate residences. The bodies were found by neighbors who were literally led to the bodies by Nicole's dog, who was reported to be incessantly barking around the time of the murders. The timeline surrounding the murders is as follows. On June 12, at 6:30 p.m., Nicole, her children, and others arrive at the restaurant called Mezzaluna. At 9:15 p.m. the same night, her sister called the restaurant to say that her mother had left her glasses there. Ronald Goldman goes to pick up the glasses. At 9:30 p.m., OJ Simpson and his friend Brian Cato Kalian. OJ Simpson and his friend Brian Cato Kalian head to a nearby McDonald's for dinner. At 9:45 p.m., they return home from McDonald's. Cato was staying at OJ's guest house at that time. At 9:50 p.m., Goldman leaves Mezzaluna with a white envelope containing the glasses. At 10:15 p.m., Nicole's neighbor hears a dog bark and cry while he is watching TV. Prosecutors then theorize that these barks signalized the murder of the dog's owner, Nicole. At 10:25 p.m., a limo driver named Alan Park arrives at OJ Simpson's home. OJ was scheduled for a red-eye flight at 11:45 p.m. At 10:45 p.m. At 10:40 p.m., Cato reported he heard 3 loud thumps on an outside wall of the guest house he was staying in. From 10:55 p.m., Alan Park buzzed OJ's intercom several times, but there was no answer. Just before 11 p.m., Alan reports seeing a shadowy figure that was 6'0" tall and over 200 pounds walking across the driveway. At 11 p.m., Alan tried buzzing OJ again, and this time, OJ answered. He claimed that he had overslept and just got out of the shower. At 11:45 p.m., OJ departs on his flight, and at 12:10 a.m., the next morning, the bodies of Nicole and Ronald Goldman are discovered. Evidence found at the crime scene included a blood-stained glove, a knitted hat, and a bloodied footprint. When OJ landed in Chicago, he was contacted by Detective Ron Phillips and told that his ex-wife had died. Upon hearing the news, OJ asked, "Who killed her?" OJ was then questioned for 3 hours by the lab. On June 17, OJ was charged with 2 counts of murder and declared a fugitive. The high-speed chase involving police and OJ's white Ford Bronco has been a lasting memory for anyone involved with the case. During the chase, OJ was sitting in the passenger seat while his friend Al Cowlings drove. Cowlings reported that he didn't stop because OJ was holding a gun to his head and that OJ was suicidal. The chase ended at OJ's home in Brentwood, California. Inside the car, they found makeup adhesive, a fake mustache, OJ's passport, and a gun. What followed was one of the most publicized trials in U.S. history. OJ was represented by a high-profile defense team, also known as the Dream Team, which was initially led by Robert Shapiro and then by Johnny Cochran. The team also included F. Lee Bailey, Alan Dershowitz, Robert Kardashian, Sean Hawley, Carl E. Douglas, and Gerald Uhlman. Barry Skeck and Peter Neufeld were 2 additional attorneys who specialized in DNA evidence. Prosecutors were Deputy District Attorneys Marcia Clark, William Hodgman, and later Christopher Darden. They thought that they had a strong case against Simpson, but Cochran was able to convince the jury that there was reasonable doubt concerning the validity of the state's DNA evidence, which was a new form of evidence in trials at that time. The reasonable doubt theory included evidence that the blood sample had allegedly been mishandled by lab scientists and technicians. The defense team also cited other misconduct by the lab related to systemic racism and incompetence. The verdict was released on Oct. 3, 1995, and OJ Simpson was acquitted. To this day, no other suspects have been questioned, and the murders remain unsolved.